Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heave is good. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish. On Tuesday, the Grizzlies lost to the Pelicans 113-102 to drop their second straight game. But it was a big day for the Grizzlies as Jaren Jackson Jr. returned from injury, made his season debut. Also, we got a bit of injury news about another Grizzlies player. It turns out Desmond Bane's toe injury wasn't exactly a minor injury. It was a little bit more significant as he will miss the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is just a bad bit of luck for the Grizzlies, who seemingly cannot get all of their players healthy at the same time. It feels particularly weird that the minute we get Jaren back, after waiting 4.5 months, that's right, he returned 4 months and 16 days after the team said he'd be out 4 to 6 months. So those pessimists were proved wrong there. But right when Jaren comes back, we find out we're going to be without our top shooter, our very important second all-star to Ja Morant, one of the guys we depend on heavily for points. And so now the next few weeks might be a little bit bumpy. The Grizzlies, as far as like never having their fully healthy squad, since acquiring Steven Adams, for Jonas Valanciunas and all that stuff a couple summers ago, the Grizzlies have started their preferred starting lineup of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams 12 times. 10 times in the regular season last year and 2 times in the postseason. Now, the plot twist is the Grizzlies only won 5 of those 12 games. Despite those 5 players having an excellent net rating together last season, the Grizzlies were 4-6 in the regular season and 1-1 in the postseason when those guys started. But the loss of Bane was felt in this loss to the Pelicans. It was definitely felt in the loss to the Wizards, where Ja Morant also sat out. And now this season, the Grizzlies are 0-3 when Desmond Bane does not play. And the obvious story of Desmond Bane not playing is the three-point shooting. Could other players step up and replace his three-point volume? So far, the answer is no. Coming into this season, the way the roster was constructed, it was blatantly obvious to most people, hey, we don't really have a two-guard behind Desmond Bane. We hope Zaire Williams can be that two-guard. He can size up. He's been working on his ball handling in Summer League, and we hope he can create his own shot, and that'd be a nice, oversized shooting guard to have. Well, obviously, Zaire's injured. And now that Desmond Bane is gone, the next man up is John Konchar. Not exactly known for his offensive firepower. We've been tracking his reticence to shoot over the years, and we noticed how it picked up greatly at the beginning of this season with him launching a lot of three-pointers. He more than doubled his career three-point attempts per possession. Well, that's come plummeting back down now, 15 games into the year. His three-pointers per possession or per minute are still up, but Konchar's per minute scoring are at a career low right now. In his defense, he's not a two-guard. He's a weirdly sized, probably small forward. He's a hustle guy. He's a glue guy. He's a rebounder, defender, keep the ball moving. He's a 3-and-D guy, but he's a standstill 3-and-D guy or a standstill three-point shooter. He can hit the open looks, and he does it with incredible accuracy. But asking him to do more than that, to score a bunch, it's not probably going to be a winning formula. The Grizzlies cannot replace Desmond Bane's three-point shooting. My concern in the offseason, well documented, was they wouldn't be able to replace the three-point shooting of just D'Anthony Melton, who departed. Dylan Brooks was making more three-pointers to start the season. That's trailed off. Ja Morant was making more three-pointers to start the season. That's trailed off. Bane was being incredible. But the people we hoped would replace it, like LaRavia gets a DNP. More on that in a second. Tyus Jones, kind of a no-show in this game. Tyus Jones hit a three-pointer within the first few seconds he stepped on the court against the Pelicans. Did not score again. Scoreless in the final 19 minutes of playing time that he had. It's hard to replace that three-point shooting. With Desmond Bane this season, the Grizzlies average 117.5 points per game. Most importantly, they average 13.5 made three-pointers, technically 13.4 made three-pointers in the 12 games Desmond Bane has played. In the 3 games Desmond Bane has missed, the Grizzlies are making 8 three-pointers per game. The Grizzlies are making under 27% of their three-pointers when Desmond Bane doesn't play, the 3 games he's missed. They're scoring under 100 points per game in the 3 games without Desmond Bane. This is a road game against Utah. The game on Sunday against the Wizards, when there also was no Ja Morant. That has to be taken into consideration. And then this game against the Pelicans. For whatever reason, the Grizzlies' second half three-point shooting has especially abandoned them. The Grizzlies made 2 three-pointers in the second half against the Pelicans. 0 three-pointers in the fourth quarter. Meanwhile, CJ McCollum heated up. He dropped 4 three-pointers in the third quarter alone against the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies were 0 for 10 on their fourth quarter three-pointers against the Pelicans. They were also 7 for 20 on their two-pointers. Add that up, that's 7 for 30 on their fourth quarter field goal attempts, where they scored 15 points in the fourth quarter. The Grizzlies only scored 42 points in the second half against the Pelicans. That's tied for the second fewest second half points in a game this season. The fewest points they scored in a second half this season was the previous game. They scored 41 against the Wizards. The game before that, in that win against the Timberwolves, where they only made 7 three-pointers for the entire game, they scored 42 second half points in that one. If you're tracking that, the last 3 second halves for the Grizzlies, 42 points, 41 points, 42 points. The three-pointers made in the last 3 second halves. 2 in the second half against the Pelicans, 3 in the second half against the Wizards, 3 in the second half against the Timberwolves. I mean, part of it, it's a little bit funny. Like, if I can take a step back, it's kind of amusing that if you average 13.4 made three-pointers and you take away a guy who's making over 4 per game, you'd think, all right, well, someone else is going to make those, so you're not going to actually make 4 fewer three-pointers because other people will be taking the shots. Something will fill up that void. Nope. Turns out you take away Bane's 4.5 made threes per game and the Grizzlies make 5.5 fewer. It's not great math. It will come up. Okay, it's not going to be this dire all the time as far as the three-point shooting, but it's going to be hard for the Grizzlies to get up to those 11 made threes, 12 made threes, 13 made threes per game that are part of their winning formula. The formula has changed for success this season. It's not going to be forced turnovers. Although frustratingly in this game, in the first half, the Grizzlies did force a fair amount of turnovers. It felt like a missed opportunity in this one, not being up by more points in the first half. It seemed like the defensive performance was good enough. The offense was really clicking. They had a 60-point half, but they were sloppy. They did not finish enough. They had some terrible fast breaks. By the way, let's talk about Dylan Brooks' fast break. There was like a 4-on-1, maybe a 5-on-1, where it looked obvious that you should throw an alley-oop to Ja Morant, and Dillon ended up missing what I guess was a layup. I am not 100% convinced that wasn't a pass. Like, it was a terrible layup, but I think there's a significant percentage chance that was not a missed layup. That was just the worst pass you've ever seen in your entire life. I think Dillon wanted to throw an alley-oop and accidentally hit the rim and backboard. Whatever the reason, it was horrifying. A really ugly look. Like, the Grizzlies had a pretty solid first half. They played well for a lot of this game. Again, if we can take a 10,000-foot view, or if we can remove the sting of defeat from ourselves as fans, that was a really exciting and entertaining basketball game. Like, it was really fun. A tremendous number of highlights. That Ja Morant changing hands in the air dunk is one of the best dunks I've ever seen. I don't think that's hyperbole. He jumped off the left foot, raised up to dunk it with his right hand, changed to his left hand. I don't feel like I've seen that. Ja Morant had a huge game. The excitement of Jaren returning. Yeah, there were hiccups on offense. He missed all of his three-pointers. He got 5 blocks. He was great on defense. A lot of good stuff happened in this game. Unfortunately, we're stuck with, all right, we lost the game, we feel bad. And when we look at the reasons why we lost the game and we see the 3-point disparity, we see that the Pelicans made 18 3-pointers. This is a game after the Wizards made 19 3-pointers. This is not really a fluke. I mean, CJ McCollum's not always going to hit 7 out of 13 3-pointers, but CJ McCollum, I mean, you tip your hat to that guy. 100% certified for life Grizz killer. His career scoring average is 19 points per game. Against the Grizzlies in his career, he averages 23 points. That's the second highest scoring average against any opponent of CJ McCollum's career. His only higher scoring average against an opponent is the Pistons, and he plays the Pistons way fewer times. In his career, he scored more points against the Grizzlies than he has against any other team. So McCollum was draining the 3-pointers. Trey Murphy 3, which felt like a revenge game to me. I can't get it out of my head that that's the guy that the Grizzlies could have drafted with their 17th pick. I mean, yes, we're excited about Zaire Williams, but I'm always going to kind of compare the two. Trey Murphy has pulled ahead. And Trey Murphy, he made 3 3-pointers, had 13 points. So the Grizzlies lose the 3-point battle by 27 points. And the painful part is it's one of those predictable things where on paper, you know the Grizzlies are going to have a hard time keeping up and making 3-pointers. And so far in the 3 games without Bane, it's been really rough from the 3-point line. But the good stuff, and again, like I said, a lot of good stuff. Ja Morant was fantastic in this game. Had a huge first half, got those 3 steals in the first half, including that one where he read the inbounds play. Finished with 36 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and those 3 steals. Had 3 turnovers, which isn't terrible. 2 out of 6 from 3. 8 out of 11 on free throws. Also, by the way, the Grizzlies outscored the Pelicans when Ja was in the game. The Grizzlies were up 1 when Ja Morant checked out with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. When he checked back in with 8 minutes left, they were down by 10. The second unit minutes continue to be apocalyptic. Again, that's not surprising. That's a thing we highlighted in the preseason. When Bane is out now, and you've elevated just yet another player off the second unit, like Contra has to come in and start. Tyus Jones and his struggles on the court. Like, Tyus Jones is not playing terribly. We hope for more. But it is just the entire unit, I think. It's just not working. Because you're asking guys to do a lot against pretty good squads. You're asking young players to step up. You're asking Conchar not to be a 10th man. You're asking him to be a starter. You're asking a rookie in David Roddy to come in and contribute, be an 8th, 9th, 10th man. The minutes aren't working. The on-off net rating swing for Tyus, it's been bad. It's getting worse. The Grizzlies per 100 possessions are 29 points worse when Tyus Jones is on the court this season. Tyus Jones was minus 17 in his 20 minutes. I mean, some of that you give credit to the Pelicans. How do we assign blame? We blame ourselves or do we credit our opponent? Larry Nance Jr. destroyed the Grizzlies when he was on the court. Jonas Valanciunas did not play very much in this one. The Pelicans the last couple of games have relied more on Larry Nance Jr. I think he's a better front court fit. He's a better front court fit when Zion plays. Zion didn't even play. We thought this was a chance to see Zion versus Ja and Zion versus Jaren for the first time since the Orlando bubble. There was no Zion. It was no problem for the Pelicans because Larry Nance Jr. was so good. The Pelicans second unit, where you have Larry Nance with 19 points. Jose Alvarado played huge minutes. Yes, he told Ja he was too small, and then Ja came down and got an and one over him. Man, Jose Alvarado had a huge impact on that basketball game. Thoroughly outplayed our second unit, thoroughly outplayed Tyus Jones. Larry Nance Jr. actually fits a prototype of player that the Grizzlies have trouble with this season. The energetic, athletic big. They have trouble containing those guys, keeping them off the offensive glass, keeping them out of the paint. I mean, Brandon Clark had a huge game, okay? Brandon Clark, honestly, best game of the season. I mean, he knocked down a three-pointer. I told you that three-pointer was coming. I was a couple of games off, but it finally showed up. Brandon Clark had a double-double. Brandon Clark played 33 minutes. He played 20 minutes in the first half because of Steven Adams' foul trouble. That's got to be a career high for minutes and a half for Brandon. Brandon Clark had 15 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists. Really nice game from Brandon. But he had trouble keeping Larry Nance under control. Also, the starkness of these on-off stats. All right, the Grizzlies, their defense is 22 points worse this season when Tyus Jones is on the court. You get that huge on-off swing. Once again, the Brandon with Ja minutes compared to the Brandon with Tyus minutes, they've gotten even more and more stark. When Brandon Clark plays this season with Tyus Jones, the Grizzlies have a negative 18 net rating. When he plays without Tyus Jones, they have a positive 18 net rating. That's a 36-point swing per 100 possessions. We have 170 possessions of Brandon Clark on the court without Tyus Jones. We have over 200 of him on the court with Tyus Jones. Again, I don't want to assign the blame purely to Tyus Jones. The second unit is overmatched most of the time they're out there. They don't have the scoring. There's not scoring up and down this roster. I talked about John Konchar's per 36-minute scoring over the last 5 games. The Grizzlies have 3 guys in their 10-man rotation who are scoring 8 or fewer points per 36 minutes. Complete non-threats on offense. That is John Konchar, also Steven Adams, also Jake LaRavia. A lot of people said, why didn't Jake LaRavia play? With Jaren returning, we figured another guy's going to be out of the rotation. Was it going to be Roddy or LaRavia? It was LaRavia who did not play. LaRavia possesses that three-point stroke we feel like we need. But over his last 5 games, LaRavia, 4 points per 36 minutes. He's not scoring. He does knock down three-pointers. He has that ability. Is he a better option than Roddy? Maybe. I don't feel passionately about it. I think the Grizzlies' second unit lineups that they used were actually, normally Bane comes back in and helps anchor the second unit as the starter to go with 4 bench guys. In this one, they brought Jaren back in. And as Jaren's first game of the season, you would expect he would be rusty offensively. But the lineup they used a lot to start the second quarter, start the fourth quarter, where it's Tyus Jones with John Konchar, with Roddy, with Brandon and Jaren, I like that lineup just fine. On paper, Yeah, seems fine. I mean, when you look at who the Grizzlies have available, who else are you going to play? You know I love the Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. front court combination. By the way, possibly Brandon had that big game because Jaren is the magical key which unlocks Brandon Clark's powers. But if you have Brandon, Jaren, and Jaren in the front court, and then if your wings are Roddy and Conchar, I mean, the other option is Roddy and LaRavia. There are no other options if you're going to play a 10-man rotation. And you got Tyson there. That 5-man unit, in my estimation, is good. It's fine. It's good enough. But they got beat in this one. They got outscored by 13 points in their time on the court. They gave up a 14-4 run in the second quarter and a 15-4 run in the fourth quarter. Although some of that 15-4 run, it wasn't all on them. The bench has to be better if you're going to beat good teams. Jaren and Dillon have to be better offensively if you're going to beat good teams while Desmond Bane is out. Jaren was 3 for 14 from the field. Made a mid-range jumper, which was cool. Had a great offensive rebound dunk, which was cool. Missed all 7 of his three-pointers. Dylan Brooks, 6 for 18 from the field. If Dillon and Jaren combined to go 9 for 32, you're probably going to lose, no matter what Ja Morant does. Whenever one of these guys is missing, I've talked about this before, if Desmond Bane is out, you have a smaller margin of error where you have Ja, Dillon, and Jaren are going to be your main offensive threats. If 2 of the 3 have a bad game, if Bane plays, you can probably endure it. But when you only have 3 guys who you can depend on probably putting the ball in the basket to a significant degree, you're going to need some outlier performances. You're going to need Roddy to hit 5 threes, or Conchar to have a big scoring game, or Tyus Jones to be on fire. You're shorthanded, thus you have fewer escape routes when things go poorly. I don't want to underestimate or underpraise Jaren's defensive game, by the way, because it was fantastic. The Grizzlies, overall as a team, yeah, you lost track of CJ McCollum a few times. You couldn't slow him down. But you basically can't slow CJ McCollum down. Also, Brandon Ingram was a thorn in the side of the Grizzlies. I mean, Dillon, you'd prefer him to guard CJ McCollum. He could probably do a better job there. But even then, that's advantage CJ McCollum. Dillon guarding Brandon Ingram. I mean, first of all, he can't guard both of the players at the same time. And Brandon Ingram has so much size on Dillon. It's a tough matchup. But the Grizzlies' defense, in my opinion, good enough. It's been good enough. They're playing hard. Strong effort. They don't have the firepower. They're shorthanded, and they cannot score. And Jaren and Dillon, when they're off on offense, you see, this is the issue with them. This is what prevents them from being all-stars. They check so many boxes that are positive, but if you want to attack their games, yeah, Dillon's shot selection is highly criticized and widely criticized. But every three-pointer Dillon bricked in this game was a fine attempt. Open attempts, getting open looks. Every three-pointer Jaren bricked, you could make the argument they were all bad looks. Maybe one was wide open. This falls back to a joke I make a lot, which is, I guess, semi-serious. Every Jaren 3 feels like a bad shot to me. He does provide valuable spacing. But the book on Jaren and Dillon, if you're going to criticize them, they are bad shooters. They just are. They are inaccurate. They are technically inaccurate shooters by the stats. Jaren's first 2 years, he was a good shooter. We don't know if that's the outlier or the last couple years of the outlier. But both of those guys, fantastic, tremendous defenders, not good three-point shooters. Both of them are subpar rebounders, and also both of them are awful at passing the basketball. I don't know if Jaren would fall over if he attempted to pass after he dribbles the ball, but he never, ever does it. I don't mean to be down, by the way, again. This was a fun, entertaining game. Jaren made a lot of spectacular defensive plays. I loved the front court rotation. Yes, Steven Adams was in foul trouble, but the Grizzlies have a great front court right now. Having Aldama as your fourth big, That's going to be good for the Grizzlies. You're just lacking your 25-point per game shooting guard. And this roster construction means you're going to feel that loss a lot because no one can compensate, or it's going to be hard to compensate for those points and those made threes on this current roster. Let's take a quick break and then come back and talk a little bit more about this loss to the Pelicans. Wrestling fans, don't miss WWE Friday Night SmackDown. It's coming to the FedEx Forum on Friday, January 6th. Catch your favorite SmackDown superstars live, including Drew McIntyre, The New Day, Liv Morgan, Sheamus, and many more. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com or the FedEx Forum box office. Okay, continuing to look at this game on Tuesday night. Like, I talked a lot about Conchar and not having the offensive firepower. Like, Conchar played well. I'm not saying Conchar didn't play well. I'm saying even when Conchar plays well, it's going to be hard to score enough. Like, he had 9 points and 8 rebounds. He played 36 and a half minutes. They went with Conchar, I thought this was interesting, over the Tyus Jones and Ja Morant minutes. One thing I expected from this game with no Desmond Bane, that we would see a lot of Tyus and Ja minutes together. The last game where Bane was out but Ja Morant was healthy, that Utah game, Tyus played 27 minutes. I don't know if it's that Tyus didn't have his shot falling. I think it was more probably defensive matchups, and they wanted the extra boost for rebounding. Like, normally, Tyus Jones comes in, like Tyus Jones came in for Conchar, and in the first quarter, you had Ja and Tyus playing together. Normally, at the end of the first half, the same thing will happen, where Tyus Jones will check back in, and you'll get some Ja and Tyus minutes. That's why I assumed it happened. It did not. They brought Conchar back in, even though he'd already played like 12 minutes up until that point in the first half, which is normally what you think all he would play in the first half. Conchar came back in to finish the first half, so it was Ja, Dillon, Conchar, Jaren, and Brandon Clark. Again, I love that lineup. I'm not going to act like I don't enjoy Conchar as like a fifth starter there alongside Ja and Dillon and Jaren and Brandon. Then in the fourth quarter, they didn't do any Tyus and Ja minutes. I thought it was a little bit surprising. John Conchar played almost the entire fourth quarter. He played almost the entire second half. And I guess it was for that rebounding and defense, which he provided. Otherwise, for the rotation, it's hard to take a ton away from it other than they went with Roddy over LaRavia. Every single minute Roddy played, could you have played LaRavia? Yeah, I think so. Was it the right call? I don't know. They lost those minutes. Would Jake LaRavia have minimized the effect of Larry Nance Jr.? I don't know. I probably think Roddy's the better rebounder, more physical, stronger. So I don't know. If you feel like it was outrageous, they did not play LaRavia and they went with Roddy, okay. I don't have a strong opinion. Santi played kind of a lot because of the foul trouble with Steven Adams. Steven Adams, got called for more moving screens, only played a handful of minutes in the first half, played a lot in the third quarter. They did not go back to him in the fourth quarter. They played so much Brandon and Jaren that I'm fine that they didn't go back to Steven Adams. Now, they closed the game with Santi Aldama and Brandon Clark. You could ask, why isn't Jaren Jackson Jr. out there? He has 5 blocks. He's moving pretty well despite the threes not going in. Jaren had already played the way the rotation had gone. He played the first 7 minutes of the fourth quarter. I think if the game was close, he would have come back in for the final 2 or 3 minutes. The game was not really that close. They were down by 10. They never got it within single digits. Actually, they did. They put together a couple of buckets, but it wasn't that close. And also, we can probably guess there was some form of minutes limitation on Jaren Jackson Jr. Steven Adams, by the way, despite barely playing, we can give him credit if you're looking for some pro Steven Adams propaganda. In the last 3 meetings of Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas has a total of 6 rebounds. The last 3 games that the Grizzlies and Pelicans have played, where Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas both played, Jonas Valanciunas is averaging 2 rebounds per game, also 6 points per game. The context is, yeah, he barely played. But it wasn't because he was hurt. It's because the team went away from him. Jonas had 4 turnovers in this game. They went with Larry Nance Jr. Larry Nance Jr. was more effective. Steven Adams himself just never really got it going. Also, 9 for 31 on free throws for the season for Steven Adams. By far the worst free throw shooter in the NBA right now. He is last by a significant margin in free throw percentage. Going back to the Ja minutes, the Grizzlies won Ja's minutes. Ja played 36 minutes. Like I said, they were up 1 when he checked out in the third quarter. They were down 10 when he came back in with 8 minutes to go. Should he have come back earlier? Should Ja have played more? I think Ja playing 36 minutes in a regular season game, that is a prudent amount of playing time. In the current NBA, with how hard the guys go when they are out there, with the way we manage the players' bodies, I think 36 minutes is a fine amount of time. All right, could he have played 38 minutes? What if he checked back in with 10 minutes to go? That's 38 minutes. You have Wednesday and Thursday off. The Grizzlies don't play again until Friday. Would 38 minutes been a bad thing? I don't know. It probably greatly increases your odds of winning. Should he have played 40 minutes? I think no. I think it's fair to only play Ja 36 minutes. Does Taylor Jenkins wish he played him 2 more minutes in the first half or 2 more minutes in the second half and gotten 38 minutes of Ja? Maybe in hindsight. But in the long run, you do, I think, have to stick with that discipline, not only with Ja Morant's body and taking care of that, but you have to allow your bench to learn. You have to allow your guys to fail some. You have to depend on players who aren't Ja Morant. You're going to be better off in the long run, I think, being disciplined with that playing time approach. So if you feel like Ja should have played more, again, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't feel argumentative this season, okay? One thing I can argue, and I haven't explicitly said it very much because I've tried to move on, but a game like this and a game like the Wizards game really highlights to me how inexplicable the DeAnthony Melton for David Roddy trade is. Melton was second on the team and made 3-pointers last year. The idea of having good 7th and 8th guys is when your players miss, you have them available to play for you. This game could have had tons of Ja Morant, Dylan Brooks, DeAnthony Melton, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. minutes. We assume, or we try to explain away the Melton for Roddy trade with, I guess this is a play for the long run. Eventually, you're not going to pay everybody, so you might as well reset the clock on a rookie that you think can be a better fit. You know, the Melton critics are like, oh, he has terrible postseasons. Although they somehow ignore the huge impacts he's had each of the past 2 postseasons when he's actually played. The Warriors series, that 4th quarter against the Jazz 2 years ago. You think Roddy's going to have better postseasons based on what? But this is a game, and the Wizards game, and hey, Ja and Bane aren't here. What if we had another young guard who can fill in and play 35 minutes when we need him to, or 30 minutes when we need him to, who plays good defense, who's a good rebounder, who generates blocks and steals and turnovers and makes threes? Games like this is where you're like, why did we do this? Like, I understand moving on from Kyle Anderson. You look at the depth chart. You look at the age of Kyle Anderson, and it's like he's not going to be a priority. Most nights we're not even going to want him to play minutes. But with the roster the way it was confusing to get rid of a guy who could be a backup point or a backup 2 or a backup 3 and is young, was on a good salary. I don't say it much because I'm trying to move on. But a game like this Pelicans loss was what was that trade about? I still don't get it at all. In the long run, will it turn out to be the right move because Roddy develops into the perfect piece? Maybe. No way to know. The front office has done a great job so far. This Grizzlies team is still good. We're not down after the second loss. We're shorthanded. We're going to be shorthanded for a little bit. We lost to a good team on the road in a competitive basketball game. We had a lead in the 4th quarter. Tiny one. But this wasn't like a blowout. Your threes did not go in. Many nights your threes will go in. Your opponent makes a bunch of them. You do not. You're missing a guy who might make the All-Star game this year, and you lose. So we're not overreacting. But we can, I think, rightfully say this is what we thought was going to happen based on the information we had before us. This is one of the reasons the Grizzlies might lose some games in the regular season this year is your depth is not as good, is not as proven, and shooting looks to be a real concern on the roster, particularly if Bane misses. Now, the Grizzlies play the Thunder on Friday night. Catch that game on Valley Sports Southeast. The Thunder are playing really, really well right now. I don't know if you know that. The Thunder have been tremendous in their last 10 games or so. They took the Celtics to the wire. They beat some really good teams. They blew out the Raptors. They've beaten the Clippers twice. They've beaten the Mavericks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is outplaying Ja Morant right now. His stats are better. They're more eye-popping. Both players are great. Shai is making 95% of his free throws, 53% of his field goal attempts. He's averaging 2 steals, 1.5 blocks, and 32 points per game. Pokashetz is kind of blossoming. He's going to destroy the Grizzlies on the backboards, guys. It's going to be hard. I mean, maybe Steven Adams will hit him with his shoulder, knock his frail frame to the ground. The Thunder matchup on Friday night is going to be hard. Luckily, the Grizzlies will have 2 days off. But it's going to be hard. Man, I hope we win. If we don't win, there's going to be a little bit more panic out there. That Thunder game is not easy. They are not tanking. They are very, very competitive and look extremely tough. Like their games they lose. They lost to the Bucks in double overtime. They lost to the Nuggets. They're beating everyone else. They dropped 145 points on the Knicks on Sunday. So you play the Thunder at home on Friday. Then you have to play at the Nets. You never know what you're getting from the Nets. They got destroyed by the Kings on Thursday night, but they've beaten some other teams. They've actually been pretty good at defense when Kyrie's been out before giving up over 150 to the Kings. Well, guess what? You're going to play the Kings after the Nets. You host the Kings on Tuesday, the day after Thanksgiving. Huge home game against this Pelicans team. Then you play the Knicks, the Timberwolves, and the 76ers. If Desmond Bane misses 2 full weeks, your next 6 games, home against the Thunder, at the Nets, home against the Kings, home against the Pelicans, and then maybe he'll come back on the Sunday, November 27th, at the Knicks. The game after that is at the Timberwolves. Then you play the Sixers. These are not gimme games. We're going to need players to step up. I think players will step up. Dylan will have good games. Jaren will have good shooting games. Someone on the bench is going to have a big game. They're not all going to be off every night. But it's time to buckle down because the Grizzlies' schedule does get a little bit tight. And then, of course, the Grizzlies' schedule is impossibly hard come December. They go on these road trips, and everyone's nationally televised, and they're all against elite playoff teams. But Bane will be back. It'll be no worries. We're very, very, very strong when our preferred players play. Just hopefully that will come sooner and not later. Anyways, I appreciate you listening to this episode. If you do not know, some of you don't know, I found out at one of our last watch parties, all these episodes are on YouTube. Usually the audio version comes out first, but if you like to see some highlights sprinkled into this episode, you want to see me talk for whatever reason, you can see all of these episodes on YouTube. And by the way, it would help me just to go ahead if you subscribed to the Grits and Grinds channel on YouTube. So please do that. Anyways, I hope you're having a great Wednesday. I will talk to you soon. Go Grizz.